Morning all. To Dr Heather Smith, the G20 Sherpa, representatives from the G20 engagement groups, Mr Tony Cook, the Associate Secretary of the Department of Education, members of the Department of Education staff and other government agencies here today. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning at this opening ceremony of the Y20 Youth Summit and to welcome you to Sydney and to Australia. At the outset, I'd like to thank the co-chairs of the Y20 Planning Group, Ms Holly Ransom, who we've just heard from, and Mr Josh Swar for their leadership, and for the entire Y20 Planning Group for all their efforts they've put in preparing this summit. It has involved a great deal of unpaid and voluntary work thus far, and I'll also take this chance to thank them in advance for their work over the coming days. The Australian Government is committed to supporting young people's engagement with the G20 through the platform of the Y20 Summit. This Y20 represents an opportunity for you to capitalise on your skills and present recommendations on the most pressing economic issues facing your generation. Ahead of the G20 Leaders Summit in November, Sherpas, finance deputies and other engagement groups have been briefed on your priorities by members of the Australian Planning Group and the Australian delegation. I know the Y20's agenda for 2014 is twofold: to highlight the challenges of the present and to guide future policies, particularly in relation to youth unemployment, which is clearly one of the leading issues facing young people in G20 member states and globally. The issue of unemployment, and particularly youth unemployment, is a reflection of sluggish economic growth, which we know has been a challenge in many countries. In recent years, following the banking and sovereign debt crises, youth unemployment has increased and remained higher than previously, indeed brutally high in some countries and regions. An increasingly globalised economy is one that provides increased opportunities for the competition and trade that drive economic growth, and governments cannot develop and implement these policies in isolation. The causes of and potential solutions to tackle youth unemployment will be improved if more countries take decisions to free up competition and access to markets that we know from our recent history drive economic growth and labour market opportunities. G20 finance ministers have committed to an ambitious goal: to taking action to lift global GDP by more than 2% over the next 5 years, over and above what would occur simply under current policies. As Prime Minister Tony Abbott said in Davos in January, if the largest economies can individually achieve higher growth and can cooperate to achieve higher global growth, every country benefits. Global growth hinges on the strength of domestic economies, and G20 countries must deliver strong individual growth strategies with meaningful reform if we are to meet our collective growth objectives. This growth ambition is a challenge not just for government and business, but for communities as well. And that, of course, includes each of you here today and young people around the world. From my perspective, I can assure you the Australian Government is committed to working with everybody, including young people, to implement the policies that deliver real, sustainable growth in the private sector. A growing economy provides the job opportunities that all young people rightly desire and that are a basis of our economic citizenship. Over the coming days, the Y20 has an opportunity to come up with concrete, practical policies and suggested actions to improve opportunities for all young people. Having been actively involved in responding to the banking and debt crises, the G20 is now shifting its focus to driving sustained global economic growth. This entails a greater focus on medium to long-term issues. We can help address these challenges here if solutions on pressing issues like youth unemployment are practical and measurable. I have a particular interest in youth unemployment. Since the financial crisis, most of Australia's economic indicators have remained in positive territory. However, our youth unemployment rate remains a challenge. We do not have anything like the levels of youth some countries face, although we have regions in difficulty. Nevertheless, a stubbornly high youth unemployment rate is always a problem. It worries me that even in the current economic environment here in Australia, access to jobs remains difficult for many young people, particularly those trying to enter the workforce for the first time. One of the ways the Australian Government is tackling youth unemployment is to ensure that young Australians leave school equipped with the necessary skills to move into further education or direct employment. We're doing this because we know that for some young people, unemployment can lead to long-term social and economic disadvantage. Safety nets and social security can buffer the impact of economic adversity on the most vulnerable in the market, but they cannot provide the opportunity for sustained employment and prosperity. The best thing governments around the world can do to get more young people into work is to ensure their policies support sustainable economic growth. A strong and stable and growing economy creates the right conditions for employers to hire. Such economies also encourage entrepreneurs to take a chance. Employers, educators and policymakers all need to do their jobs in addressing this. Employers need to be in a position to take risks to create jobs for our next generation of workers. Educators need to ensure that young people are equipped with the skills employers need. And policymakers need to ensure the economic conditions are right for employers to ensure growing employment opportunities. But you, the Y20 delegates and your peers, need to share your own experiences, and you need to develop ideas to address youth unemployment based on your own perspectives and experience. This can be a powerful tool to produce sustainable long-term policy results. I'm looking forward to seeing the recommendations developed by you all over the coming days and as a result of several months' work. I encourage you to work to develop a concise, action-focused communique over the coming days. And if I could leave you with 3 key messages. The Y20 will achieve its best outcomes if you develop and suggest practical policies to G20 leaders that are implementable and measurable and are particularly relevant to each member's G20 growth strategy. If you focus on what young people can do to drive economic growth and address the barriers to employment, this will be useful for all governments to hear. And if you continue your advocacy for these implementable, measurable policies after the conclusion of the summit when you return home. You have a wonderful opportunity here and I encourage you all to make the most of it. But just as importantly, I hope you enjoy your stay here in Australia and that you will all have a chance to enjoy just some of what our wonderful country and this wonderful city have to offer. My best wishes for the coming few days.